Welcome to another PureRead audiobook. It's wonderful to have you with us. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. Supporting us in this simple and easy way ensures we can continue adding more delightful audiobooks for your listening enjoyment. The following story is copyrighted PureRead Limited, the home of books you can trust. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Georgina, Regency Romance by Charity McColl. Chapter 1. Mama's Pet. Georgina heard her bedroom door opening, and unlike other times when she would turn around with a smile on her face, this time she pressed her nose against the window, ignoring the person who had entered and who she knew to be her mother. "My pet, I brought you some warm chocolate milk and a piece of fruitcake," Hannah Gallagher spoke to her daughter in a soft, soothing voice. "Place it on the table, Mama," Georgina said without turning around. She was playing up again, and Hannah didn't want to get drawn into a battle of wills with her 12-year-old daughter. Where had her sweet angel gone and left this sullen creature in her place? What had happened to the child who would run to her, hug and tell her how much she loved her? Now the best she would get from time to time would be a tight-lipped smile that didn't even reach the eye. Who was influencing her beloved daughter into rebelling? Hannah was scared, and she recalled her older sister's words. When Tabitha had visited them early that spring, she had mentioned that Georgina was growing up very fast, and maybe it was time to allow her to join the rest of her age mates at the local school. "How can you say that to me?" Hannah had cried. "You know that Georgina is a sickly and pale child, and easily prone to catching disease from the other children. You of all people, Tabitha, know just how much I have struggled to keep my child safe from diseases." "That was then, and this is now, Hannah," Tabitha had said. "Mark my words, it's just a matter of time before your little angel rebels against your constraining ways and not allowing her to have any friends. What child has a birthday party every year with only her mother and servants in attendance? What you're doing to Georgina isn't healthy, and you know it. What's your fear anyway? Georgina easily falls ill, and I don't want my child to suffer. She's all I have since her father died when she was 5, and I can't bear to lose her too. Georgina has outgrown the childhood illnesses and should be allowed out. You can't continue to keep the child locked indoors. The day she will finally set foot outside this house, Hannah, you will have a hard time getting her to once again remain inside. Begin to introduce her to the sunshine and fresh air a few minutes a day, until her system gets used to the outdoors." But Hannah had been adamant that her precious child wouldn't go outside and breathe in the foul air, nor mix with any of the other village children. Now she wasn't sure that her sister's predictions weren't coming true. Lately it seemed as though all Georgina did was press her nose against the window and blow mist onto the glass. She had lost all interest in her piano lessons, exasperating poor Miss Maple, who threatened to discontinue the lessons more than once, and Hannah had to plead with her and even offered her monetary incentive so she wouldn't abandon Georgina's lesson. The only time Georgina seemed to come to life was when Monsieur Pierre, her French tutor, came for the afternoon lessons. Because she knew that her mother didn't understand the language, the young girl would insist on speaking in French for the whole 2 hours of the lesson, and Hannah often felt as though her daughter was talking about her with the tutor. But she didn't know what to do because scolding Georgina only made her worse. She would sulk for hours and even days, till her mother decided it wasn't worth it at all. "Georgie." "My name is Georgina. I'm not a boy, Mother." Still, she didn't turn around, and Hannah sighed in defeat. These battles were intensifying by the day, and she sometimes feared that she would wake up one morning and find her daughter gone. She thought about putting grills on the windows of Georgina's bedroom, but she knew it would only cause more trouble. Her one comfort was that since Georgina had never set foot outside, she probably didn't know how to climb down the trees, so for now, she was safe. Georgina wished her mother would go away and stop hovering. She was tired of being stuck in this room and the schoolroom all day, while she could see other children laughing and running around. That was the reason she always stood at the window, watching to see the other children play. Aunt Tabitha had tried telling Mama that being out in the sunshine, even for a few minutes a day, was good for her skin and health, but Mama wouldn't listen. Instead, she bought her more books to read, asked Miss Maple to give her more piano lessons, and brought her endless cups of sweet hot chocolate. Not that she hated the beverage, but she felt as though it was a bribe for her not to insist on going outside. One day, She vowed to herself, "I will finally gather the courage to march up to the front door, open it, and walk out into the sunshine." With a sigh, she turned to the table. Her mother was standing at the doorway watching her, but she practically ignored her as she ate the piece of cake and washed it down with the now cold hot chocolate. Georgina thought about throwing a tantrum because of the cold chocolate, but decided that the effort was too much. "Your birthday is coming up in a few days' time. What would you like me to get you?" Georgina shrugged and picked up one of the storybooks that she liked to read. What was the use of having a birthday party when only the cook, butler and housemaid would be present? She had read storybooks where the little girls had friends over for birthday parties, and she longed to have one, but knew that her mother would never allow that to happen. She considered all the village children as germ-carrying creatures and would never let them anywhere near the house. When Hannah deduced that she would be getting no response from her daughter, she picked up the tray and left the room. Tears were coursing down her cheeks as she wondered what she was going to do to make her child respond to her as before. Where had she gone wrong as a mother? What hadn't she done for Georgina? Georgina looked at the closed door and sighed. She didn't like treating her mother badly, but she hoped that her parent would relent and allow her to step out into the sunshine. At least during summer and spring she could look out and dream. During winter and autumn, the windows were barred and shut up, and she often felt like a prisoner. She reached for the painting that she insisted on having in her bedroom. It was one that had been done years ago, of her father holding her when she was a baby. He had been a handsome man and she could barely remember him. If she didn't have the painting as a reference, she would probably have forgotten what her father looked like. Why couldn't her own childhood be normal? Chapter 2. Seeds of Discord. "Happy birthday, dear Georgina," Hannah and the 3 servants crooned, while the birthday girl stared sullenly at the frosty cake that cook had baked in her honour. She had turned 12, and to all intents and purposes should be going to school with her peers, but once again her mother had put her foot down and said she would continue to be tutored at home. "Smile, Georgina," her mother tried to coax a reaction out of her, but only met cold blue eyes. Georgina had on a new white dress, new shoes and stockings that matched her dress, as well as a beautiful coloured feathered hat, but all that didn't matter to her. She needed freedom, and she turned to stare at the massive oak door. Sometimes Georgina thought the door had been deliberately made heavy, though she couldn't open it. But she was growing up, and one day she would have the strength to open the door and walk out of this prison. It never once occurred to the young girl to use the back door, because her mother had never allowed her to go anywhere near the kitchen. When the singing was done, her mother handed her the knife so she could slice the cake. She did so, placing a huge chunk on her plate, then dropped the knife and picked up her portion and walked out of the room. The servants weren't surprised at the girl's reaction, and they often whispered among themselves that their mistress was doing the child a great disservice. If only she would allow her to go outside and play, the sun might return the smile to her pale face. Georgina didn't intend to eat the cake just then. She just needed something to do with her hands, and after a while she got tired of digging her fingers into the creamy mess. Pushing the plate away, she prepared to take up her usual position at the window. Allen Morrison looked around the drawing room, and when he noticed that no one was paying attention to him, he snuck out of the house through the back door and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. He wanted to have some fun before Harriet, his elder sister, was sent to find him. Coming to visit Uncle Arthur was the best thing that had happened to him in a long time. Arthur Carruthers was his mother's brother, and this was Alan's first visit to the small hamlet of Graby. The joy was that he was away from the strict eye of his father, who never hesitated to take the cane to his behind, with the hopes of taming what he called the wild streak in Alan. On the way to his uncle's house, he had seen a beautiful maple tree that was just calling out to him to climb it. The problem was, it stood right outside an imposing house, and he wondered what the owners would think of him taking liberties with their tree. He shrugged as he started in the direction of the house with the tree, as he termed the house in his mind. Alan was careful not to expose himself, and he hid in a hedge across from the house and watched the windows. It was a 2-story building and the lower windows were empty. It was the top south window that caught his attention, the one where the tree stood. A small pixie face was pressed against the window, and he ducked lower, feeling as though the person had seen him. It was obviously a young girl about his own age, and he wondered why she didn't come out to play like the other children. He started to leave because he didn't want the girl to begin screaming when he climbed the tree. He could always return the next day. Something about that face haunted him, and he found that he couldn't leave. Throwing all caution to the wind, he scrambled up the tree and nearly lost his footing. It was a long fall from the top, and if he broke his arm again, he would never hear the last of it from his sister, and when they got back home, his father, one arm holding on for dear life, the other flayed wildly, and he barely managed to knock on the window. Georgina had turned away for a moment when she heard a frantic knock. Thinking it was coming from the door, she rushed to open it, only to find the corridor empty. Something made her look towards the window, and her eyes nearly popped out of their socket. It was a boy, and he seemed to be in trouble. If she didn't open the window soon, he would fall. "Wait!" she cried out softly and opened the window. "Give me your hand," she told him, and he did so, and after a near mishap she managed to pull him into her bedroom, and they both collapsed on the floor, trying to catch their breath. Then Allen began laughing at the situation, and soon Georgina joined in, and soon the bedroom was ringing with boisterous mirth as tears rolled down the children's faces. Finally, Georgina pulled herself together and sat staring at the strange boy in her bedroom. At the back of her mind, she wondered what her mother would do should she walk in just then. "What's your name?" she asked, strangely unafraid of the boy with silver-grey eyes and an untidy lock of black hair. Allen Morrison. What's yours?" "Georgina Gallagher, and it's my birthday today. I turned 12. Do you want some cake?" "Oh, yes, I do." Allen looked around him eagerly, his eyes lighting up when they landed on the plate. He looked at his hands and wiped them on his shirt, then held his hands out for the plate. Georgina had never seen someone eat so fast, and when the cake was all gone, she asked if she should get him some more. "No." Allen shook his head. "If I have too much cake, then I won't be able to take dinner, and my uncle and aunt will want to know why." "Why did you climb up to my window?" "I saw your face pressed against the glass, and you looked sad." Allen observed the room and was fascinated by all the pretty girly stuff. It reminded him of Harriet's room back at home. When he had been good, she would allow him inside and let him play with her dolls. Even though she was already 15, she couldn't bear to part with her many dolls. He turned to look at Georgina. "Why don't you play outside? Uncle Arthur says a growing child needs plenty of sunshine so their bones can grow strong. You're so pale." "I've never been outside," Georgina said wistfully. Allen stared at her. He couldn't imagine not going outside to play. "Why?" "Mama says if I go outside I will get sick." "Shh!" Allen made a rude sound and Georgina was shocked at first. Then she giggled. "I play outside all the time and I'm never sick. Come and see." He practically dragged her to the window and pointed out at the children who were running up and down. "Do any of those children look sick to you?" There was a footfall in the corridor. "Quick, hide under the bed." Georgina pushed Allen, who scrambled under the bed, and she quickly straightened the covers. The door opened and Hannah stood in the doorway. Something was different about her daughter, but she couldn't place a finger on what it was. Georgina's eyes seemed unnaturally bright, and Hannah almost panicked. What if her daughter was falling ill? She hadn't had a bout of sickness in a long time. What if the old ailments were returning? She hurried over to the bed where Georgina was seated. "Are you feeling all right, Georgina?" "Why, Mother?" The little girl looked like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth, and that should have alerted her mother that something was off. As it was, Hannah felt Georgina's forehead and the temperature was normal. She was relieved. "I thought you looked a little flushed." "I just ate a piece of my birthday cake," Georgina said, wishing her mother would go away so she could resume her conversation with her new friend. Allen scared her, but at the same time he fascinated her. Where had he come from? "Okay then, I was just coming to check and see if you needed anything." "Maybe some orangeade, Mother?" Hannah nodded and almost skipped out of the room. Her daughter was back. Perhaps the sullenness was just a passing phase, and she would soon be the sweet little girl she had always been. Georgina wouldn't let Allen come out from under the bed until her mother had bought them orangeade. She waited a few minutes and then carefully opened the door and peeked down the corridor. It was empty, and she knew her mother was probably in the kitchen supervising dinner. "She's gone." Georgina raised the covers, and Allen crawled out. "Mama brought us some orangeade and cookies. You need to take some and then leave. She always comes back to check and see if I have eaten everything." Allen stuffed a few of the cookies in his pocket. He had to have an appeasement gift for Harriet so she wouldn't tell on him. After drinking 2 glasses of orangeade, he walked to the window. "Georgie, may I call you that?" She nodded vigorously. "May I come back tomorrow to play?" "Yes, but be careful because tomorrow is Tuesday, and Mama likes to watch over Mariah as she cleans my room. When you come, hide behind the hedge, and once they are gone, I will open the window for you." Georgina had never met someone like Allen, not that she had met any children her age in the past. He came by the house every single day, and she knew it was just a matter of time before her mother found out what was going on. Holding secret meetings in her room was quite thrilling as it was frightening. Allen was very mischievous, and he often dared her to get out of her bedroom and enjoy the sunshine. "Mama would never let me out of the house," she said sadly. "She wouldn't allow anyone to open the door for me." "Your house has 2 doors, does it not? There's the front door, and I know that can be quite heavy. Our door at home isn't open often because Papa says it's too heavy. We have a smaller side door, and then the one leading from the kitchen. Georgie, if you wanted to, you could always walk out of the kitchen door." Georgina thought for a while, all caution at the forefront. If only she was as brave as Allen. "Tomorrow, I won't come into the house. In fact, till you come outside and find me, I won't ever come into your bedroom again," Allen said as he scrambled out of the window, down the tree, and at the bottom he looked up and waved at her. Georgina thought he was joking, but the next day she saw him standing at the hedge where he normally hid until she waved at him to come. She waved as usual, but he shook his head, and because she was scared she didn't venture out, but neither did Allen come in. As she lay on her bed that night fighting the tears, she decided that she would go out of the house the very next day. She didn't want Allen to think of her as a baby or a scaredy cat. She would show him that she can be just as brave and adventurous as he was. "Where is Georgina?" Hannah didn't want to panic, but she hadn't seen her daughter all morning, and the tray of cookies and milk lay untouched in her bedroom. They checked the whole house but couldn't find Georgina anywhere, and Hannah thought she would just die if something had happened to her child. Just as she was getting ready to go and report her missing child to the village constable, Georgina came in through the back door, looking dishevelled, and her stockings were torn. Her dress had a smudge of what Hannah suspected to be mud, but her cheeks were rosy and her eyes sparkled. "Where have you been, Georgie?" Hannah asked, and was surprised when she wasn't corrected as the little girl often did when her name was shortened. "I've been worried sick." "I went out to play with my new friend," Georgina announced. Her small fists were folded as if she was holding something in them. "What's that?" "These." Georgina opened her fists, and her mother saw a squashed pulp of something red. "Berries that Allen and I picked," and to her mother's horror she put them into her mouth and chewed them. "Spit them out immediately. You'll make yourself sick." Georgina swallowed and grinned at her mother, her teeth stained with berry juice. "Mama, did you know that berries grow in our garden? It was Allen who showed me which ones to eat and which ones not to." "Allen? Who is Allen, and where did you meet him?" "He climbed up to my window, and I let him into my bedroom on my birthday. He is my best friend, Mama, and tomorrow he says he'll teach me how to make a sling so I can catch birds." "You will do no such thing. Georgina Charlotte Gallagher, go to your room and clean up and then come down for dinner." "Yes, Mama," Georgie said meekly, and ran to her room, her heart soaring with excitement over the adventure she had had with Allen. He hadn't taken her far because he said it was her first day outside and he didn't want her to get sunburn, especially since she hadn't taken a hat with her. Hannah thought that by locking her daughter inside her bedroom, she would stop her from leaving the house. She was greatly mistaken because now that Georgie had tasted the outdoors, she wanted more. When Hannah brought a mid-morning snack, she didn't find her in the bedroom, and something drew her to the window where she stared at the pieces of cloth that clung to the branches. It was obvious Georgie had climbed out the window, and the thought made Hannah feel faint. What if the silly child had fallen and broken an arm or leg, or worse, her neck? She had to find out who this Allen child was that had sowed seeds of discord in her little angel. When Georgina marched into the room at tea time, her mother was waiting. "Where have you been, Georgina?" "I went to play at Allen's house." "Why did you lock me in the bedroom?" she demanded. I tried to open the door, but it was locked, so I went out through the window. I want to meet this Allen. You will take me to his house at once. Georgina shook her head. I came home because his uncle and aunt are having guests staying over. Harriet said it is bad manners to just drop in on people without any invitation. Georgina had a thoughtful look on her face. If you want, I will take you there tomorrow when the guests have left. For Georgina, it was the best summer ever, while to her mother it was a nightmare. Nothing she did or said stopped her daughter from leaving the house. She met Allen Morrison and thought him a very naughty boy, but Georgina wouldn't allow her to say anything negative about her new friend. I don't like Mrs. Graham or Mrs. Smith, and yet they are your friends. I don't tell you not to talk to them, Mother. You're just a child. What do you know about friendships? In the end, it was Mrs. King, their cook, who made Hannah see reason. From what I hear from Arthur Carruthers's home, the young boy is only here for the summer, and then he and his sister will return to London. Let the little ones be. Besides, you will admit that ever since the child started playing outside, her appetite has improved, and her cheeks are rosier. Hannah nodded. Summer will soon be over, and the boy will be gone forever. The likes of him don't belong in this place, so don't fret. Georgina was sad that summer was coming to an end. She and Allen had shared so many adventures. Now that her mother had allowed her to play with him, she taught him how to play the piano, and he taught her how to fish with her bare hands. She even managed to catch a big enough fish for their dinner one day. Allen enjoyed George's company because she didn't behave like most other little girls he knew. She had a head for adventure, and wherever he led, she followed and even seemed to have more fun than him. But the children also shared some thoughtful moments, with Georgina complaining about her mother and how strict she was. Before you came, I had never set foot outside the house. Mama won't even let me go to church, and I can hear them singing from my window. She always said the sunshine would harm me. Papa is also strict, but in a different way, Allen sighed. They were seated on a rock beside the small stream where they usually fished, or just spent time wading through the not-so-deep waters. He says I have a wild streak in me that needs taming. At least here, I have had time to play, but at home Papa only lets me play for a few minutes each day. One day we will grow up and run away together, Georgina said, and then blushed when Allen looked at her thoughtfully. He nodded. I would like that very much. We can then see the world and speak French in Paris, play the piano in Austria, and maybe go to Africa to see what the colonies look like. Mama says Africa is a dark continent, and most people who go there never return. If they do, their heads are not quite right because of the strong sunlight that burns their brains out. Allen chuckled. Your mother is wrong. In London, some people I know have been to Africa many times and they brought back diamonds and other gems. Africa is a beautiful place. When I come back next time, I promise to bring you some paintings showing what Africa looks like. Georgina didn't want the day to end because in just 2 days' time, Allen and his sister would be returning to London. She didn't want him to know, but each time she thought about him, her stomach fluttered, as if butterflies were playing inside. She wished she could tell someone how she was feeling, but she had no one to talk to, so she shared with her dolls late at night. She couldn't imagine life without Allen, but she knew that the day would eventually come when they would have to say goodbye, and it was with tears in her eyes that she bid Allen farewell, promising to write to him and exacting the same promise from him. Hannah watched the two children shaking hands solemnly, and her heart sang joyously. Cook had been right, summer had ended, and the notorious boy was leaving. She was doubtful if they would ever set eyes on him again, but she kept her thoughts and her joy to herself, even as she comforted her distraught daughter. Chapter 3. The Rebellion. I don't know what I'm going to do about this girl, Hannah muttered to herself as she tried Georgina's door and found it locked. What was going on with her daughter that she had now taken to locking her bedroom? And it was obvious that she wasn't at home either. Ever since Georgina discovered the outdoors, nothing would induce her to stay in if the weather was fine. I blame that Allen boy, Hannah murmured as she went down the stairs to ask any of the servants if they had seen Georgina. She had rejoiced when summer was over 3 years ago, and her daughter had bid a tearful farewell to the boy who had influenced her adversely. She had thought at the time that the rebellion was over, but it was only just the beginning. True, Georgina became less sullen around the house and did her lessons, but at exactly 3 o'clock she would walk out of the house and announce that she was going to the town square to walk around. It didn't matter whether it was warm or cold, the girl left the house at the same time each day and always returned 2 hours later. Then she insisted on attended church, forcing Hannah to go along, much to the delight of the old vicar who had been coming to the house and pleading with her to resume church attendance. Georgina made friends with some of the girls from church and began insisting that she wanted to attend school like any normal child. On that matter, however, her mother was adamant and Georgina gave in grudgingly, but her afternoon walks didn't stop. At that precise moment, Georgina was seated at a sidewalk cafe taking tea and dainty cakes. This was her vantage point, and every single day without fail, she came here and just gazed at the people passing by, wondering if their lives were anything like hers. She knew she had won the battle against being confined to the house, but was sure that her mother was one day going to find a way to curtail her movements. In the meantime, she would enjoy the days out of the house as much as she could. Each summer for the past 3 years, she had walked past Mr. Arthur Carruthers's house, hoping to catch a glimpse of Allen Morrison, but it was obvious her friend had not come visiting again in 3 years, and each year on her birthday, she kept a piece of cake, hoping he would climb up the tree outside her window and share it with her. But year after year, Allen didn't turn up, and the letters she wrote to him were never answered. One time, she had gathered the courage to walk up the driveway to the Carruthers' residence, only to be informed that no one was home except the servants, and no, none of them knew where Master Allen was and if he would ever be coming back. Had Allen forgotten all about her, she wondered, sipping her tea? Did he ever think about her the way she thought about him? Had she just been a childish summer pastime, and he was now busy with his own life? Then she gave a start and sat up straight, her heart pounding. It couldn't be. She rubbed her eyes and stared at the tall, lanky youth strolling through the town square. It was Allen, and she forgot all the manners she had been taught by her tutors and her mother, forgot that she was supposed to behave like a lady, and stood at the edge of the cafe and shouted, Allen Morrison." She waved frantically, hoping he would hear her. She gave a sigh of relief when he turned her way and raised a hand, then sauntered over. Georgina was so excited to see Allen that she threw her arms around him to hug him, but he stiffened and took a hasty step backwards. She blushed at the slight rebuff, hoping no one had noticed. "How are you, Georgina?" His voice was deeper than she remembered it. Obviously he had grown in the 3 years that they were apart, and he sounded very formal, not like her childhood friend who always had a cheeky glint in his eyes. Allen looked very serious indeed, and reserved, and Georgina almost regretted why she had called him over. "Will you join me for a cup of tea?" She pointed at her table, and he thought for a while, then shrugged and followed her to the table. His manners were impeccable, but as they sat across from each other, they didn't seem to have anything to talk about. Georgina remembered all the conversations she had had in her head about what she would say to Allen when she met him again. She had dreamed of meeting him and him being very excited to see her, and that they would walk hand in hand in the town square, declaring to all and sundry that they belonged to each other. That was all a dream, and she sighed inwardly. "What have you been doing with yourself, Georgina?" He waited for a waiter to pour him a cup of tea, thanked them and put in a spoonful of sugar. "You look very different," he smiled briefly. "So much seems to have changed about you." "I'm still the same girl you met 3 years ago," she said. "As you can see, I'm no longer confined to the house by my mother, and I have made a number of friends with girls at church." Even as she spoke, she could see that his mind was wandering, and she wanted to scream at him to pay attention to her. "What about you? How is London?" "Just the same old city." His shoulders were slumped, as though he was carrying the weight of the world on them. "How was your birthday this year?" She wanted to tell him that it had been terrible since she hoped he would come and share her cake. "Mother allowed me to invite a few friends over. Have you come to stay for the rest of summer?" He shook his head. "Uncle Arthur is very ill, and I have come to escort him to London so he can get more advanced treatment. My aunt is also frail, and since they can't travel alone, my father asked me to come and travel with them." "I'm sorry to hear that your relatives aren't well. Is there anything I can do?" He shook his head. "I'm sorry I'm not such good company, but I will call on you before we leave for London. Forgive me if I'm not able to come to the house soon, but I have to help them put their affairs in order before we leave for London." I will look forward to your visit. Her mother was waiting when she sailed into the house, riding high on a cloud. Where have you been, Georgina? Tea was over a while ago, and I don't expect that cook will want to be disturbed. She's preparing dinner now. Georgina smiled. I already had tea with Allen at the sidewalk cafe. Her eyes glowed and her mother groaned inwardly. Not that Allen boy again. So he was back again to cause havoc in their lives again. This time she wasn't going to sit by and watch as the insolent boy drove her daughter further away from her. Is he here for the summer? His uncle is very ill, and he has come to escort him to London for treatment. He promised to come and call on me, Mother. Please don't refuse to let him in. For the next few days, Georgina hardly left the house for fear that Allen might come calling when she wasn't at home. Each time a carriage passed by, she ran to the window, and each time a knock sounded on their front door, she was there before Mr. Stiffs. But Allen never came, and once again her hopes were dashed. She wondered why he wasn't calling and decided to take a walk to his uncle's residence. I'm sorry, miss. The gardener was the first person she met when she walked in through the gate. Mr. Arthur took a turn for the worse, and Master Allen had to rush him to London. They left yesterday morning. Did he leave any message for me? A letter or something? The elderly man scratched his head and shook his head. The only messages left with me were the payments for the various suppliers, and I have dispatched all of them. Nothing else, miss. Georgina turned away, fighting back her tears. She couldn't believe that Allen hadn't come calling like he had promised. Then she remembered the gardener's words. His uncle had taken a turn for the worse and had to be rushed to London. Maybe he would write when he got to London and explain why he hadn't come calling. Allen felt guilty at the way he had left abruptly without calling on Georgina, but perhaps it was for the best. His uncle and father were both ailing, and they both expected that he would take up the mantle and settle their affairs. Besides that, Harriet was engaged to be married, and as the head of the family in his father's place, he had to do the right thing by her. There wasn't time for himself, and he regretted not spending enough time with his childhood friend. He promised himself that he would write to her and explain their hasty departure, but he never got the chance to. Chapter 4. The Presentation. Georgina stood before the mirror and stared at her reflection, frowning at the freckles on her cheeks. Her mother always said they had developed because of spending a lot of time in the sun, but she doubted that. They had always been there, but youth had kept them hidden away. Apart from the freckles, everyone said she was beautiful, but she didn't see it. All she saw was a girl with large blue eyes, snow-white hair, and with a mature, slender figure. A number of her friends were either married or engaged to be married, but her heart belonged to Allen Morrison, even though she hadn't seen him in 4 years. She couldn't believe that time had rushed by so fast, and it was 7 years since they met. She had turned 19 just last week, and as always, she had kept a piece of cake, hoping he would come, but he never came. Allen also never wrote to her, and she despaired of ever seeing him again. She could not believe that he had forgotten about her, and she felt abandoned by him. Don't be silly, she chided her reflection. He never gave any indication about being romantically interested in you at all. It was all in your dreams. She shook her head sadly. Many times she had dreamed of Allen riding up to the front of their house and insisting on seeing her, then gently hoisting her on his large horse. He would ride away with her into the sunset. Georgina, her mother called out, if you don't hurry, we shall be late for Lady Hemming's ball, and that won't do. Coming, Mamma? She called back, adjusting her sky-blue gown and picking up her matching hat and small purse. She hated attending these balls because it was obvious she was being paraded for a suitable cap. She couldn't imagine loving anyone else, and she went to them just to keep her mother off her back. And as usual, halfway into the ball, Georgina complained of a headache, and her mother had to beg their leave. In the carriage back home, Hannah observed her daughter. Georgina seemed so sad. I think that was a good turnout for the ball. A number of young men filled your card. It's a pity we had to leave early. Georgina merely shrugged. What do you think of Lord Percival Wilkes? Don't you think he would make a suitable husband for you? He has a wandering eye, and I would be fighting half the women in Graby for his affections. What about William Hodges? He has a lazy eye, Mother. Peter Winters. Too full of himself and quite pompous. Abraham Kent? He has a weak chin, Mother. One by one, her mother mentioned the young men she had noticed and who she thought might make suitable husbands, and one by one Georgina shut them all down. Just what kind of a man are you looking for, or hoping for, Georgina? Georgina shrugged. I will know him when I see him. But Hannah doubted it. Deep down she knew her daughter was pinning for Allen Morrison, and at this rate would end up as an old maid on the shelf. She had to do something urgent if her daughter was to get a good match. I think you're not interested in these men because you've grown up with them and actually outgrown them. I know just what to do. Georgina looked at the large ballroom of the Gunther House, a magnificent building that had just been opened by the Regent Prince and which was the talk of the town. Invitations to social events in the building were months long, and the fact that Georgina and her mother had managed to get tickets to the ball that was taking place was because of her Aunt Tabitha's husband, Uncle Rupert. Uncle Rupert was a member of Parliament and had called in favours to get invitations for his wife's niece. His own 2 daughters were already married, and he didn't mind helping Georgina find a suitable husband. Georgie had always liked her uncle because he was kind, and whenever she visited, they would talk politics and world affairs for hours. They enjoyed each other's company, and Rupert was determined that his niece, by marriage, would find a man who would challenge her mind and not just keep her at home breeding children and waiting on him. Georgina had never seen such magnificence and splendour before, and her mother had to keep tapping her chin. "Behave like a lady," Hannah said as she curtsied to a passing lord. "Don't stare like a village lout," she hissed, and Georgina giggled, earning herself a sharp look. This was her second ball, and apart from the splendour she was bored. She had already danced with a number of young men, and found them all wanting. They all seemed to want to talk about themselves, and she was tired of pretending to listen to them. Why couldn't she find anyone who stirred her interest, she wondered as they left for home. "Your card was once again full. If you continue with this trend, we'll soon find you a good husband, Georgina." "Yes, Mother," she said listlessly, staring unseeingly outside the carriage window. London at night was beautiful with the gas lamps that lit the main street. She wished she could stop the carriage and take a stroll along the well-lit streets, but knew that if she as much as suggested it, her mother would have the vapours. If only Allen were here, he wouldn't hesitate to stroll with her, but then again maybe not. The boy she had met when she was 12 was different from the teenager she met 3 years later. What did he look like now? And would he still be very serious? "A number of the young men will be calling for you tomorrow afternoon. Thank goodness we don't have a ball or soiree to attend, and we can then spend a quiet evening at home." And for the next few days, Georgina played hostess to a number of young men who came calling with their mothers or guardians. She was polite, but disinterested, and her mother was soon complaining to her sister. "Tabby, I've done all I can for this girl, but she doesn't seem interested in any of the men presented. Georgina has a complaint about every one of them." Tabitha smiled sympathetically at her sister. "If you ask me, the girl has someone in mind and she is pinning away for him. I know that same look and behaviour because our eldest Samantha gave us the same trouble when she came out. Apparently, she had met a man at the library, and he took her fancy, and she wouldn't have anyone else. Thankfully, Gordon turned out to be a wonderful young man. Why don't you ask Georgina if she has someone in mind?" Hannah snorted in a very unladylike manner, causing Tabitha to raise her eyebrows. She met a boy when she was 12 years old, actually didn't meet him as much as he climbed the tree outside her window, and she let him into her room. Hannah's tone was indignant and Tabitha hid a smile. She always knew that her niece had a cheeky streak in her, but this was too much. That boy taught Georgie how to climb trees and run out of the house, taught her how to fish and get herself as dirty as a street urchin. But you must admit, it did our Georgie a lot of good. Has she ever fallen ill in all this time? Hannah shook her head, reluctant to give credit even where it was due. That boy was rebellious and he taught Georgie how to misbehave. Thankfully, he has been out of the picture all these 7 years, but I live in dread of when they will meet again. What is this naughty boy's name? I might just know his family. Allen Morrison. Tabitha gave a start. Really? That boy is very mature. His father died a few months ago, as did his uncle, and he was left a vast fortune. Mark my words, with his irresponsible ways, he will soon gamble, drink, or philander the inheritance away. You do him a disservice, sister dear. Give the boy a chance and he might just prove you wrong. That will never happen, Hannah said, dismissing the topic and refusing to listen to anything more her sister had to say about Allen Morrison. It was at a small ball that Georgina saw Allen again. She recalled the last time she had met him and held back, not wanting to be rebuffed and embarrassed. This time it was Allen himself who came forward and took her hands in his. Thankfully, this is a small ball, or else I might never have spotted you, Georgie. Oh, have you been attending balls then? A few of the ones you were at, but each time I spotted you, it seemed like you disappeared. It is wonderful to see you. Georgina was very cautious. This was a different Allen from the one she met 4 years ago. He actually seemed happy to see her, and she felt hope begin to flare in her bosom again. I easily get bored, and so have to tell Mama that I'm not feeling well. Allen chuckled, and though he looked grown up and very handsome and serious, she saw something of the 12-year-old boy lurking behind his eyes. My cheeky girl! His eyes roamed the small ballroom, and he glared at any young man who looked like he was coming towards Georgina, making them hastily change their direction. Georgina was glad her mother hadn't come to this ball, or she might have cut short their conversation. Allen tucked Georgie's arm in his own and smiled at her. Would you like to take a walk around the garden? Lady Hazel has a well-lit garden, so no impropriety. Besides, many people are retiring outside because of the stuffiness and heat inside. Okay then. They walked around the lit garden, greeting other couples who were strolling as they were. You're too quiet, Georgie, Allen said. He was so happy to have her by his side, but he felt a little tongue-tied. The last time we met you were so cold and then you lied that you would come and call on me, Georgie blurted out, then blushed when Allen stopped and turned her around. He had grown so tall and she felt quite small beside him. Georgie, I was 15 and dealing with so much. My uncle and father were ailing and so much pressure was on me. Besides that, I had to be the man because Harriet was engaged to be married and I had to stand in for Papa. You could have at least left me a note or written to me. I could have but didn't, and I'm sorry. He looked down at her, then raised her chin gently. Will you forgive me? You know that I will. Their easy camaraderie returned, and they found themselves spending almost the whole evening walking up and down, discussing various issues. And how is your father now, Allen? He sighed. Papa died a few months ago. I'm very sorry for your loss. She squeezed his arm gently, and the gesture warmed his heart. I didn't know, because we just came into town a few weeks ago. And your ma has been busy presenting you to society. So she can find me a husband. There are some good men around London. You've come to the right place. Georgina wanted to scream at Allen that he was the only man she was interested in, but she realised that in all that, he hadn't showed any romantic interest in her. Her old friend was back, but that was as far as it went, at least from the way Allen was behaving. It's getting late, and I need to get back home before Mama takes it into her head to come and look for me. I had a nice time, Georgie, and I would like to call on you tomorrow morning so we can go riding, but that's if it's all right with you. I would like that very much. Chapter 5. The Reunion. Georgina could barely sit still at the breakfast table, and her aunt commented on her restlessness. Uncle Rupert was an early riser and was always long gone before she came down for breakfast. Georgie, what's going on? Is there an insect biting you on your seat? She giggled, earning herself a sharp look from her mother. No, Auntie. My friend is calling to take me driving this morning. I haven't seen him for a while and I'm so excited. Tabitha's eyes narrowed. This could only mean one thing. Her niece had reconnected with Allen Morrison, and the look on her sister's face told her she had also deduced the same. What time is he calling for you? I could ask one of the maids to go with you as chaperone. He said any time from 8 this morning. The doorbell rang, and Georgie wanted to jump up and run to open it like she used to at home. Then she remembered that much as her aunt was quite liberal. She still encouraged good manners. That must be him now. She sounded breathless, and Tabitha shook her head. Her niece had it really bad for this boy. Allen and his sister, Mrs. Harriet Sumner, were announced, and Tabitha was delighted to finally meet the young man who had her niece in knots. She knew that as soon as they had left, Hannah would moan about the boy's wild ways. Her motto was never to be overly strict, because she knew that rebellion often grew from being too rigid. "Do come in. It is nice to finally make your acquaintance." Tabitha held out a hand. "My condolences on the passing of you, father. My husband and I had the opportunity to dine with Mr. Morrison, and we found him to be very pleasant company." "Thank you, Mum." Allen bowed slightly to her. "My sister and I would like the pleasure of the company of Miss Georgina for a ride around the park this morning." Tabitha turned to her sister. "Hannah, what do you say?" Her voice brooked no nonsense, and Hannah grudgingly gave her permission. They didn't need a chaperone after all because Harriet was with them. She was now a married and respectable woman, so Tabitha knew her niece was in good hands. "I know your mother was wishing me to Africa," Allen said when the carriage drew away from the curb. "She has never liked me, that much I can tell." "Mum is strict with those she doesn't know." Georgie found herself defending her mother. "When she gets to know you better, she will warm up to you." Allen gave a snort, and his sister frowned at him. She was reading but keeping an eye on the couple. She had always known that her brother had a soft spot for Georgina Gallagher, but she didn't know just how soft until the evening before, when he breezed into her house and begged her to be their chaperone. "Oh, the joys of love!" she smiled as she thought of her own husband. "Also was in Paris as the Prince Regent's envoy, and he was due back in a day or two. They were deeply in love, and he had wanted her to accompany him, but she had to be there for Allen, who was just beginning to get the hang of running their father's estate." This became the first of many rides, and much as Hannah frowned on it, she had to accept that her daughter seemed happier. Georgina, on the other hand, seemed to bloom under Allen's attention. She seemed to bring out the best in him too, and he soon found himself thinking about adventures the way he had when he was young. "One day I will travel around the world," Georgie said one day, dreamily gazing at the docks. They had taken a drive to the docks so she could see the small steamboats coming in. She longed to go sailing but was considerate of Harriet, who seemed a little under the weather. What they didn't know was that their chaperone was Incente but put up with their company because of her brother. "Whenever I look at pictures of ships, I imagine what it would be like to sail away across the seas and see the world. I have often found myself wondering the same thing too, but with the responsibilities that I have right now," Allen shook his head. "Learning about Papa's businesses and managing what he left is a full-time job. I'm sorry if I've been taking up so much of your time when you're obviously busy." "All work and no play makes Allen a dull boy," he grinned cheekily at her. "One day I would like you to come and visit my house." "I would like that very much." "Then we could arrange it so you can come for tea this Saturday." "I'll find out from Mama and Aunt Tabby if there's any function we have to attend. Then I will let you know." "Good. Now tell me, why did you grow up so fast? I seem to be running to catch up with you." Chapter 6. The Inducement. "If Georgina comes to tell me that she wants to marry that boy, I will just die." Hannah put a hand up to her forehead and Tabitha rolled her eyes. Sometimes her sister could be so dramatic. "And why is that?" "That boy is up to no good, but my daughter won't see beyond his handsome face. I don't like him, never did, and never will." "Hannah, the best way to push your daughter into the arms of a man you disapprove of is to show her that kind of attitude. You know how stubborn Georgie is, and if she feels like you're looking down on Allen, you will push her the more into his arm." "It won't happen, because I have found just the right man for Georgie. He is 24 years old and quite mature. He also comes from a good upper-class family and has the proper upbringing." "Oh, really? What is this one's name?" "Charles Talbot." Tabitha nodded. "I know his family. They're good people. Georgie could do worse." Hannah frowned. "Your words say one thing but your tone another. What is wrong with Charles Talbot?" "Just be careful that you're not pushing your daughter into a loveless marriage just to prove a point, Hannah. The last thing that you want as a mother is to see your child wasting away year after year just because she wants to be obedient to you. You could end up with a daughter who hates you. Then what will you do?" "Georgina doesn't know what is good for her, and as her mother, I have to guide her in the right path. That Morrison boy isn't good for her, and I know it. If only she could open her eyes and see." "Why do you dislike this boy so much?" "Allen Morrison is a mischievous and trouble-making boy. He doesn't have good intentions in as far as Georgina is concerned, and my fear is that he will ruin her." He is streetwise, and my Georgina has only ever lived in the village. What chance will she stand if he decides to entice her into sin? He will only end up bringing scandal and disrepute to Georgina, but before it comes to that I have to act. That night, before Georgina went to bed, her mother came to her room. Hannah took a brush and began brushing her daughter's hair. Georgie knew that her mother had something on her mind, but she decided to be silent and see what would come next. Georgina, you know that we have been in London for close to 2 months now, yet you've shown no interest in any of the young men you've been introduced to. That's because none of them is interesting enough, Mother. You mean like that boy? His name is Allen, Mother. And what is so wrong about Allen? He's intelligent, fun to be with, and comes from a good family. Even Uncle Rupert approves of him. And besides, his sister Harriet is also a respectable woman. What more do you want, Mother? Has he given you any indication that he is romantically inclined towards you? Georgina didn't know what to say. From your silence, I gather it is something you have also thought about. So what, Mother? We're both 19 and we need to take our time when it comes to courtship and marriage. Unfortunately, 19 for a man is like 12. Women tend to mature faster than men, so you can be sure that if Allen Morrison is thinking about marriage at all, it is to a girl who is only 16. Just like you should be thinking of an older and mature man who will be able to take care of you. All the boys I have met so far are either 19 or 20. What's the difference? I'm not talking about them. Hannah paused. There's a young man who has been calling on you, but you've not been at home. Georgina pulled away and turned to look at her mother. Really, Mother? His name is Charles Talbot, and he works in the War Office. He is 24 years old and comes from an upper-class family. He would be good for you, Georgina, because he is widely travelled and you will have so much to talk about. I'm not interested in him, Mother. Listen, Georgina, I have been very patient with you and indulged all your childish whims. You're not growing any younger, and the season is almost over. It would be a great shame, not only to me, but to your uncle and aunt as well, to have lived in their house for 3 months with nothing to show for it. Think of the shame of returning to Graby without any prospects for the future. Georgina knew that appearances mattered a lot to her mother, but she felt as though she was being pushed into something she didn't want. Charles Talbot is your best chance at happiness, and I told him to call for afternoon tea tomorrow. And you had better be here, Georgina. Georgina was obediently waiting in the drawing room when Charles Talbot was announced. If she wasn't already deeply in love with Allen, she might have thought him a very handsome man indeed. But her heart wasn't hers, and all she could do was listen to him as he introduced himself. Her aunt's maid brought them tea, and as she poured and handed him a cup, she noticed that he had nice long fingers. Your mother tells me that you speak 4 different languages. Have you ever thought of applying for a job at the Foreign Office? She stared at him, wondering where he was going with his conversation. Why would I do that? Because skills such as those shouldn't go to waste. Oh, but a woman is expected to marry and have children. Doesn't that mean that any skills she possesses get lost in her married life? Charles chuckled, his dark eyes crinkling at the edges. He had dark brown hair, which was neatly combed, unlike Allen's, which had a tendency to quickly become ruffled. She found herself comparing Charles to Allen in so many ways, even though she knew she wasn't being fair to either man. Times are changing, and more women are settling for careers, as well as taking care of husbands and children. Actually, studies show that married women make the best workers. Oh, really? I speak the truth. Look at our hospitals. Half the nurses are married women, and offices are now giving them a chance. Something to think about, she murmured as she took a sip of her tea. Charles didn't overstay his welcome, and the moment he left her mother dashed into the room. Well, she demanded, what did you think of Charles Talbot? Isn't he a mature man? If you like that kind, Georgina said dryly. What is wrong with you? Hannah's tone was quite exasperated. That boy has made you crazy. Let me tell you something, Georgie. You better set your sights on marrying Charles Talbot, because his is the only good offer you're going to get. You need to give up on meeting Allen Morrison and hoping that something will come of your childish meetings. He will never see you as anything more than a country girl he can unload his troubles on. You make a good listening companion for Allen, but don't imagine that he views you as someone he can marry. Hannah didn't know how close to home her words were. Georgina had often wondered if she was nothing more than a companion to Allen, just a friend. What if what her mother was saying was true, and he saw her as nothing more than a friend? She just had to find out. Chapter 7. The Disappointment. Georgina was crushed by her mother's words about Allen, but she had to find out if there was any hope for them. She had to meet Allen one last time and find out if he felt the same way she did. It didn't pay to keep hanging along, hoping for something to happen when probably there wasn't anything that was inclined to happen. Allen noticed that Georgie was unusually quiet when they met for their usual drive around the park. Even Harriet's eyes seemed to question her mood, and he shrugged as if to say, "I have no idea what's going on with Georgina." "You seem very quiet today. I hope all is well at home." "Mama says the season is about to come to an end, and we have to go back to Graby. We're attending fewer balls and functions because Mama seems set on going back home." "That's a pity. What will you do when you get back home?" And that was when Georgina knew that her mother had spoken the truth. She had hoped that Allen would jump at the chance of offering for her hand, but instead, all he wanted to know was what she was going to do when she got back home. Her heart lay in tatters, and by the time Allen dropped her off back home, she jumped down and rushed into the house without a backward glance. Allen turned a bewildered look to his sister. "What did I do now?" "You are the dumbest man that I know," Harriet said in disgust. "Take me home to my husband." Meanwhile, Georgina locked herself in her room and wept her heart out. It was apparent the love was one-sided, and it was just as well. She wouldn't see Allen again, and she would concentrate on getting to know Charles Talbot instead. The thought filled her with so much pain, but there was only so much that a woman could take. Hannah silently rejoiced when her daughter announced the next morning that she never wanted to see Allen Morrison again. Tabitha looked on in disapproval but didn't want to interfere. Her husband had told her to leave matters well enough alone and let mother and daughter sort their own issues out, but she knew her niece was hurting, even though she said she didn't want to see her young man again. "Now we have to prepare to entertain Charles. He was really impressed by your conversation when he came yesterday. His mother wholly approves of you, and they are thinking of coming for dinner one day soon." Georgina gave a half-hearted response to her mother's words, but Hannah didn't care. Allen Morrison was out of the picture, and she could see a bright future ahead for her daughter. Yes, she had done the right thing, and Georgie would one day thank her. Allen couldn't believe that Georgina was never home whenever he called. He left her notes but never got any response. He was worried that he had done something to offend Georgina, and he missed his friend and their conversations. What was worse, each time it was her mother who came to the door and conveyed the message that Georgina wasn't home. It was as though she enjoyed taunting him with the information. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his feelings towards Georgie had taken a different turn. He wanted to tell her how he felt, but wasn't getting the opportunity. He tried to go to her house, but was turned away, and he left quite dejected. Georgina was watching him from the upstairs window and longed to go to him, but she strengthened her resolve not to give in. If Allen didn't love her the way she loved him, then there was no use wasting each other's time. She couldn't imagine that he saw her as merely a sounding board, and that one day he would marry a woman who was younger than him, as her mother often pointed out. Charles Talbot took advantage and showed up every day bearing small gifts. One day it was a pretty trinket, the next it was with a box of creamy chocolates, just the kind she loved, and one day he came with a beautiful silk scarf which he told her was from India. He also took her driving around the park, but to Georgina it wasn't the same. Charles made small talk, but she either didn't respond or she chose to ignore him. Her heart and mind were all on Allen, and try as she did, she couldn't get him out. Charles was patient because he knew that Georgina was going through something, and even though he suspected that another man was involved, he didn't have proof, so he held his peace. At least she was going out with him, and her mother approved wholeheartedly. It was just a matter of time before he won her over. Whenever Charles brought her gifts, Georgie felt more and more guilty because she knew that she didn't love him and wasn't ever likely to. But her mother was happy, and she began to convince herself that it was all for the best. At least Charles wanted to marry her, unlike Allen, who had never expressed any such desire. She couldn't wait around forever, so it was time for her to move on with her life. As summer drew to a close, One evening, Georgina's mother found her sitting on her bed, staring at the wall. She wasn't aware that her face was wet with tears until Hannah wiped them away. "Child, you do realize that all that is happening is for the best. You have found a good man who wants to marry you, and there are rumors that next week Charles intends to propose to you. Someone saw him at the jeweller's and he was buying a beautiful ring." "It could be for someone else," Georgina said, wiping her eye. Hannah laughed happily. "No, his mother has been hinting at it for a while now, and I do believe that it's going to finally happen." She hugged her. "Charles is a good man and utterly devoted to you. When he proposes to you, make sure that you accept him. This is the way it is meant to be." "Yes, Mother," Georgina said despondently. "Please, I would like to be alone now." Hannah was sure she had won, and so she didn't argue with her daughter. Immediately upon leaving, however, Georgina flung herself across the bed and wept. It was going to happen. She was going to accept Charles's proposal and eventually get married to him, even though her heart lay with another. She convinced herself that she was happy at the news. Chapter 8. The Reconciliation. Harriet glared at her brother, and Allen paused from taking his breakfast. "Why am I getting the silent treatment and the glares, Harriet?" "Because of your foolishness." "Is what?" She pierced a piece of ham, as if she was stabbing someone, and Allen's brows went up. "What am I supposed to have done now?" "You're sitting there stuffing your face, when out there someone else is encroaching on your interests," she hissed at him. "When are you going to wake up and realize that you're about to lose a very precious thing?" "My businesses, as far as I know, are doing all right and in good hands." "Is that all you think about? You deserve whatever is coming to you?" Allen frowned, knowing that his sister was trying to tell him something. Harriet realized that her brother had no idea what she was talking about. She put her fork and knife down and looked at him. "I heard from someone at the market that Charles Talbot was seen buying an engagement ring." Allen still looked blank. "And he's been seen in the company of Georgina Gallagher." Allen stared at Harriet as her words sank in, and then suddenly he wasn't hungry anymore. "Harriet, will you go with me to call on Georgia?" For the first time that morning, she smiled at him. "I thought you'd never ask." Allen was nervous when he raised his hand to knock at Georgina's aunt's house. He hadn't been received well in the past, and he wondered if today would be any different. To his dismay, it was Hannah Gallagher who opened the door once again. "What is it you want, Allen?" "Good morning, Mrs. Gallagher." "State your business. We have a lot to do today." "I would like to see Miss Georgina, please." "She isn't here." Hannah didn't bother to be civil. This man wasn't going to ruin her daughter's plans. Where could she have gone this early? Hannah shrugged and made as if to shut the door in his face. "Wait, please." "What is it?" "Would you please ask Georgina to call on my sister?" "I doubt she will come, but I will pass the message to her." Allen turned away, quite dejected, and Harriet shook her head. "So you're just going to give up that easily?" "What can I do? Georgina isn't at home, and short of sitting out here on the porch to wait for her, there's nothing I can do." "Georgina is at home. You can count on it. You just have to find a way of getting to her." "If it was back in Graby, I would have climbed up the tree beneath her window. I don't know which her room is." "Try. The worst that could happen is that someone will open a window and glare at you." "What if it is her mother's room, or maybe her aunt's room?" "What if it is Georgina's room? You won't know until you try. You were always good at climbing trees. Do you want to say that you're shy all of a sudden?" Allen walked to the garden and looked at the tall tree that was standing there. Like Harriet said, the worst anyone could do would be to glare at him. If the police were called, he could always come up with something to defend himself. He crept up the tree even as Harriet stood watching him. He was sure she was rooting for him and Georgie. No wonder that she never minded chaperoning them. Georgina was staring at a fashion magazine when she heard something pelting her window. At first, she thought it was the robins that liked to peck at the window, hoping for morsels. But when the noise persisted, she stepped to the window and stared in disbelief as a well-dressed Allen hung from one of the branches. He motioned for her to open the window, and she was reminded of her birthday 7 years ago when she had first met Allen and let him into her bedroom. "What is going on?" she asked. "I came to call on you, but your mother said you weren't in." He looked down and then at her again. "Georgie, I can't have a meaningful conversation with you while hanging from a tree. Please come and meet with me downstairs." Georgina started to shake her head. Then she saw Harriet standing at the foot of the tree. "All right then, get down before you slip and hurt yourself, and before my uncle sees you and calls the police. Please, come down and let's talk." "I'm coming. Now go." Chapter 9. The Proposal. For the second time, Hannah walked to the door when the bell chimed, and she was ready to blast Allen when Georgina walked up to her. "Mother, they are my guests. Please let them through." Hannah hesitated as if she wanted to slam the door in Allen's face, but her daughter's expression made her move away, and the stiffness of her shoulders showed her strong disapproval. "Do come in, Allen and Mrs. Sumner." Georgina thought her heart would pump right out of her chest. She wanted to fling herself into Allen's arms and tell him to hold her and never let go. She could hear her mother making disapproving sounds in the background, but chose to ignore her. "If you don't mind, I would like to speak to Georgina alone, Mrs. Gallagher." "That is highly improper," Hannah began protesting, but the look Georgie gave her made her shut up. "Mother, please give us time to speak alone. After all, what could go wrong? We're in a house full of people." Harriet was amused at the way Hannah was behaving, but in a way she understood the woman. Letting go was never easy. "Mrs. Gallagher, let us leave these two to talk. The sooner they're done, the sooner we can be on our way." "Come this way," Hannah said ungraciously, and led Harriet to the drawing room. Georgina led the way to the parlour and then sat down, feeling weak all of a sudden. "This is quite a surprise," she said, twisting her hands nervously on her lap. Allen moved and sat on the couch next to her, placing his large hand over hers and calming her down. "Georgie, please hear me out and don't interrupt until I'm done, okay?" She nodded. "Georgie, my dearest heart, my darling." "What?" she whispered. "No talking until I'm done. I want to ask you to be my wife," he smiled at her open mouth. "I have loved you since I first saw you when we were 12, and the past few weeks that we have spent together in London have reminded me of the person I used to be." He touched her cheek gently. "You always brought out the best in me, and when I would have been too wild you managed to tone me down. You complete me, Georgie and I would very much like to be your husband." "But you never said anything." "That's because I didn't feel worthy of you. You were always so prim and proper, the perfect lady, and there I was, a highly spirited boy. I could never tell what you were thinking or feeling, and I was afraid of having my heart broken in case you didn't reciprocate my feeling." "What changed?" "Harriet told me that rumours are going around that Charles Talbot is about to propose to you. He was seen buying a large ring." Allen smiled sheepishly. "I don't have a ring for you, at least not just yet, but you have my heart, Georgie. I chose to tell you how I feel, even if you don't feel the same way that I do. That's what I wanted to tell you." "Oh, Allen!" Tears welled up in George's eyes and he wiped them, but more took their place. "I thought my heart was broken when you didn't say anything, and yet I thought we were getting very close." "What are you saying?" "The whole summer I have been hoping that you would show me a sign that you love me the way I love you, and when you didn't seem to have any feelings I decided to respond to Charles Talbot's advances. I was going to say yes to him because I couldn't bear that you didn't love me." "Oh, my darling, we've both been very foolish." Allen drew Georgie close, and she rested against his chest. He put her away and held her at arm's length. "I hope this means that you will agree to be my wife." "Yes, indeed, yes." "Thank you for taking a chance on me, Georgie. I promise to love and cherish you all the days of my life." "And are you?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need your mother's blessings." Chapter 10. Forgiveness. Georgie thought her mother would burst into tears when she announced that she and Allen were engaged and he would be bringing her a ring later that day. "This cannot be happening. It's not supposed to happen like this," Hannah whispered hoarsely. Allen looked at Georgie, scared that her mother's attitude would make her change her mind about their engagement. "Mama, I think we need to talk," she smiled at Harriet and Allen. "Please excuse us, we'll be right back." She led the way out of the drawing room and into the parlour where Allen had just proposed to her. She turned to her mother. "Why do you hate Allen so much, Mother? Why do you disapprove of him this much?" Hannah sat down tiredly. I don't hate him, it's just that I don't trust him. I don't understand. From the day you met Allen 7 years ago, you changed so much. I couldn't get you to obey me in anything anymore, and I knew it was because of that boy's influence. Mama, Allen is a man. Georgina could afford to be gentle with her mother. You're my only child and I have no other. You're the only person I have ever truly loved, and after your father died, I couldn't bear that I could lose you too. That is the reason I have been overprotective of you. It's because I didn't want anything to happen to you. Oh, Mama. You had so many childhood problems and ailments when you were small, and I was always afraid that something bad would happen to you, and I constantly worried for you when you spent time running around the countryside with Allen as a child. When Allen finally left that summer 7 years ago, I was so relieved that it was all over. Imagine my horror when you reconciled at 15 and then a few weeks ago. It just about killed me, Georgie. I hope you understand that. Everything I have done has been for your own good. Mama, I am no longer a child, and neither is Allen. We've grown up and matured, and our days of running around and climbing trees are over. We know what is expected of us as adults, and I would like it very much if you could respect me that I can make my own decisions now. You know how hard that is, Georgie? Georgie nodded. I understand how you have been feeling and your fears, but even you have to admit that I never suffered for going out into the sun and running around. You yourself said that I was much healthier. I know I said that. Mama, you're going to have to learn to let go. I love Allen, and he loves me, and we're going to be happy together. But what about Charles Talbot? You're as good as engaged. Mama, it isn't fair to marry a man when I'm in love with another. We would have ended up wounding each other deeply because I could never love Charles the way I love Allen. It would have eventually affected our relationship, and I know the last thing you want is for me to be unhappy. I'm so sorry if I was too harsh and strict with you, Georgie. I only did what I thought was best for you. And I appreciate it, Mama, but please allow me to live my life, make my own mistakes and learn from them. You can't continue to hold on and control my life forever, Mother. Hannah nodded, tears pouring down her cheeks. I'm sorry. Georgie moved closer and hugged her mother. I love you so much, and I want you to be happy, Ma, but I also have a right to be free and happy. Please forgive me for stifling you, and for a childhood too many restrictions and consternations. You did it for my good, and I love you for that, Mother, and I forgive you. Please forgive me for being very rebellious just to get back at you. Mama, I never want you to be unhappy. Hannah cupped her daughter's face. Do you really love this Allen boy? She sighed. I'm sorry. Do you love Allen Morrison? Yes, Mama, Georgie said simply, and her mother looked deep into her eyes. Apparently whatever she saw there satisfied her, and she nodded. You have my blessings to get married. Let's go and tell your young man the good news. Georgina and Allen held hands and walked up and down her aunt's garden, knowing that the adults were watching them from the well-lit drawing room. They were careful not to stray out of their sight and give them cause for concern. I feel like I'm in a dream, and I never want to wake up. Georgie rested her head on Allen's shoulder as they strolled slowly. That you really love me and my mother and aunt and uncle have given their blessings to us. She held up her hand and stared at the beautiful diamond ring that Allen had placed there earlier that evening when he came for dinner and to meet her uncle formally. My darling, it's not a dream. This is real. We are so blessed that we have found each other when we have both been very foolish. It scares me to think that if Harriet hadn't found out about your engagement to Charles, that you might have agreed to marry him. He shook his head. Just rest assured that I would never have let the wedding take place because I would have pestered you until you listened to your heart. Even the moon is shining on our love, Georgie said, looking up at the moon which was shining brightly up in the sky. It seems as though everything is in agreement with our union. And I say, God is good to us. Now, does this mean that you will want me to stay at home and take care of the house and children? No, Allen chuckled. I have commissioned a luxury yacht in your honour so that we can take a cruise around the world, just like you have always dreamed. That will be my honeymoon gift to you. Georgie turned and hugged Allen, kissing him gently on the lips, and then smiling up at him. I love you so much that it scares me, knowing that there's so much love for you within me. And that is how it's supposed to be, because I love you so deeply that I don't ever want to imagine a day spent away from you." Inside the house, Hannah watched the joy on her daughter's face and turned to look at her sister. "Thank you for helping me see what was right in front of me, Tabby." "That's what sisters are there for. Those two will be very happy. A love born of adversity grows with each passing day because they are both aware that they nearly lost each other."
The end. Thank you for listening. Here at PureRead, we aim to serve you, our dear readers and listeners, with good, clean Christian stories. You can be assured that any PureRead book you pick up will not only be hugely enjoyable but free of any objectionable content. We are deeply thankful to you for choosing our books. Your support means that we can continue to provide stories like the one you have just listened to. Please like and subscribe to our channel. That way you'll be the first to hear when new stories arrive for your enjoyment. To browse our range of clean and wholesome titles, go to pureread.com. God bless you and thank you again for listening.